tonight, as we come to this passage, we're going to see two really big things. We're going to see, first of all, the power of Satan, and then we're going to see the power of Jesus. So let's just start with the power of Satan. Let's jump straight in. And as we think about this passage, I want us to try and use our imaginations. I want you to try and imagine you are one of the disciples. You have been following Jesus around from time to time, and I want you to imagine that you are on the boat that Jesus is on as it pulls up to the shore. By the way, I don't know what you're like on the sea. I'm not always great, but your legs are like jelly. Your stomach is woozy, because you've just been in the middle of the most ferocious storm that you have ever experienced. And Jesus has miraculously made the storm stop, just like that. And even still, I would imagine you're probably ready for a nice, quiet rest. So you step out of the boat. You're maybe thinking of what a relaxing afternoon you might be able to have. And as you step off the boat, all of your plans for peace and quiet go completely out the window, because you hear this awful shrieking noise. It's a noise that sends shivers down your spine. It's worse than the sound of a trapped animal. It's worse even than the sound of, say, a monster in a horror movie. Because what you hear are the screams of a human being. And not just any human being, but the most wretched, most broken, most tormented person you have ever laid your eyes upon. And you watch. You watch as he runs towards you. You maybe imagine what he would have looked like. He's got long, greasy, tangled hair, perhaps. He's got a big, ragged beard. He's got eyes, and you would say that they're full of fury, but they're also full of fear as well. He is a demented individual. And he's completely naked. He's covered from head to foot in congealed blood and encrusted dirt. He has got more gashes than you can possibly count. Some of those gashes, some of those cuts, they're red and they're bloody and they're fresh. Some of them are much, much older, and they've healed over and they've left hideous, ghastly scars. And you look at this man, and you can't quite work out what your overwhelming emotion should be. Should I pity this man, or should I just be repulsed? And then there's the smell. Can you imagine the stench? Can you imagine how you would retch whenever you get a whiff of all of those years of filth and grime? Can you imagine that sudden urge you would have to throw up whenever you smell all of those bodily fluids? I mean, this man is a mess. He is like a rabid dog. In fact, if he was a dog, I mean, we all know exactly what would happen, don't we? This man is broken beyond repair. And Mark explains for us what's going on. He tells us this man has an evil spirit. In fact, he has many demons living within him. This man is under Satan's control. And Satan's control is complete. And it's cruel. It's complete because no matter how much people try to do something, it just hasn't worked. Notice, for example, verse 4. We see that he had often been chained hand and foot. Now, that sounds cruel, and I am certainly not denying that that was tough love. But clearly the people who live in this area, they have decided that there's nothing else they can possibly do for this man. He's a danger to himself, he's a danger to other people, and no matter how much they try to reason with him, no matter how much they try to get him to just live an ordinary, safe life, it just doesn't work. So you can maybe imagine what it was like. One day they decide, well, we can't reason with this man, but if we can maybe just get him to stop cutting himself open with all of these rocks, maybe then we might be able to make a little bit of progress. And so they team up. They get rope, They tie him up, nice and tight. And then, imagine the terror on their faces as they see this man. He's like a crazed bear, and he snaps the rope, and he walks free. So then they decide, well, rope obviously isn't strong enough. What about something else? What about iron? And so they get the strongest, thickest iron chains that they can possibly find. They chain him up. He looks like Hannibal Lecter. He's completely subdued. And then what happens? Well, verse 4 tells us he tears the chains apart. I think that emphasizes for us just how much Satan has got this man completely in his grip. All of these people, they pull their resources together, they work together as a team. In a sense, they are ganging up, they are taking the fight to Satan, they are trying to, in a strange sort of way, set this man free. And yet, it's like shooting a T-Rex with a pea shooter. It just doesn't work. And by the time that Jesus arrives on the shore, well, this man is in a worse condition than he's ever been in all of his life. Notice verse 5. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. You know, if this man had a disease, you'd have to conclude it's terminal. It's incurable. In fact, if this man had a disease and he was to show up at A&E, he'd be put straight into isolation, wouldn't he? The staff wouldn't want him anywhere near any other patient in case he passed this on. Satan's control is complete. And it's cruel. Because it leaves this man shrieking day after day and night after night. It leaves him without a friend and without a companion in the whole world. It leaves him filthy. It leaves him with sores that are full of pus and a mind that is full of anguish. I mean, as harsh as it is to say, it's pretty apt that he spends all his time amongst the graves, isn't it? Because really, he'd be better off if he was dead, wouldn't he? Satan's power is so desperately cruel. Well, there's an obvious question, isn't there? I mean, we all understand how awful this was. But what's it got to do with us? I don't think any of us have ever seen a demon-possessed man snapping iron chains as if they were made of spaghetti. So what's it got to do with us? Well, what we need to realise is that even if Satan today doesn't use demon possession, and that's certainly not his normal tactic, he still loves to trap people and he still loves to destroy them. He loves to get under people's skin and he loves to dominate them. And it's entirely possible that some of you here this evening are every bit as trapped as this man. It's possible that no matter how hard you try to break free, you just can't escape. Satan's got his claws dug into you. Maybe this evening you know it. Maybe you're all too aware of Satan's destructive power at work in your life because you're always angry. You're always flying off the handle at the tiniest wee thing. You know you shouldn't, but it's the way you've been for a very long time. Everything just seems to irk you more than it should, and you're always angry. Or you're resentful, you're bitter. Your soul is like a cesspool. It is full of hate and anger. Maybe it's over something that happened years and years and years ago. Maybe it's over just life in general because life hasn't quite worked out in the way you would like it to. Maybe you're bogged down in some sinful habit. and you have indulged this habit for so long, it's practically instinctive by this point. Maybe it's the content you view online. Maybe it's the amount of time you spend online, frittering away the time God has given you. Maybe it's gossip. But no matter how hard you try to change your behaviour, you just can't do it. Maybe it's not a habit that Satan uses to get at you. Maybe it's a one-off sin. Maybe it's something from your past, and Satan uses the guilt from that sin to torment you. And you just can't get past it. You close your eyes at night and you're terrified that when it comes to the final judgment, God is going to hold that against you, and there's nothing you can do about it. We need to realise, even though Satan maybe doesn't work quite as dramatically as he does in this passage, he loves to dig his claws into us, and he loves to ruin us as best he can. And maybe for some of us, what we need to realise is that Satan actually, he's at his most dangerous when he's at his most subtle. It's easy to look at the person whose life is a mess and to see that Satan lies behind it. But what about when someone's life looks pretty much okay? The mum with the spotless house and the well-behaved kids. But she's so obsessed with keeping up with the Joneses that nothing's ever enough. She's always on the cusp of happiness. She never quite gets there. She needs one more thing, and one more thing after that. The managing director, who's so obsessed with getting up the next rung of the ladder that any thought of why he was made or why he's here goes completely out the window. The family man who's always there for his kids, and he's always there for his neighbours whenever they need help, but he's so blinded by all the things that he does for other people that he never quite grasps that he needs his sins to be forgiven. Or the woman who gets it. She gets that she's a sinner. She gets that she needs salvation. She gets that she can't fix this mess herself. She gets that her only hope is to follow Jesus. That's the only way she can be truly happy. It's the only way she can be forgiven. But she just can't bring herself to do it. Maybe she worries about what her family will say. Maybe she worries about whether it's a betrayal of her upbringing, and so she never takes that final step. Wonder, does any of that sound familiar? Every single day we're meeting men and women and boys and girls who are hopelessly trapped by Satan's power. And it's possible some of you here tonight, maybe some watching on YouTube later, it's possible that you're in exactly the same boat. Satan's power is complete and it's cruel. And so we need to see the good news this evening, and thankfully that is exactly what this passage shows us. So we've seen Satan's power. Now we want to see the power of Jesus. Power of Jesus. So what is Jesus going to do about this? Well, first of all, notice what Jesus doesn't do. He doesn't splash holy water all around the place. He doesn't scream magic words at the top of his voice. We see exactly what he does in verse 8. He says, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." And what happens next? Well, imagine it's a movie. And this is the climactic scene. You can imagine what might happen next, can't you? There's a great struggle between Jesus and the demons. You expect there to be lots of drama. Maybe Jesus gets knocked off his feet once or twice, but he gets up and he braces himself and he screams at the top of his voice. And you expect the director to maybe zoom in on Jesus' face, and you can see the strain and you can see the beads of sweat on his forehead. And finally, at last, after a great struggle, Jesus triumphs. Except that's not what happens. There's none of that. Jesus' power is so much greater than the power of Satan that all Jesus has to do is speak. And the demons have no choice but to obey. It's incredible, isn't it? And that is the constant message of the Bible. That's why we read the passages that we did way back in Genesis chapter 3. What does God do? He makes a promise. He promises he's going to send his Messiah. He says that the serpent is going to strike the heel of the Messiah, but the Messiah is going to crush the serpent's head. And here in this passage this evening, we have a taste of that, don't we? A taste of Jesus Christ not simply overcoming the power of Satan, but absolutely wiping the floor with Satan. We read Colossians 2. That chapter tells us that by going to the cross, Jesus disarmed Satan. Jesus has made a public spectacle of him and his followers. It's hard to get more public than what we have in this passage. Jesus has absolutely trounced the enemy. And that's what we have in Mark chapter 5. It's a snapshot. It's a tiny picture of Jesus' victory over Satan. It's a picture of what Jesus is going to comprehensively accomplish as he goes to the cross and he triumphs over Satan and sin and death. And so again, I want you to imagine you're there. I want you to imagine you are looking this man in the eye. And I want you to notice verse 15. He's sitting there, he's dressed, and he's in his right mind. His life has been completely transformed. Those awful, demented impulses are gone. Those anguished cries and shrieks are gone. That frenzied violence against himself is gone, because Jesus has completely undone all of Satan's cruel work. And that's amazing. But what's really amazing for us isn't simply that this happened, it's that this is the pattern for all of time. Jesus has triumphed at the cross. Jesus has disarmed Satan. And it's so important we know that. Yes, we have to fight against him. Yes, he comes against us and he tries to get his claws into us and he tries to drag us down. But he is a crushed, broken, beaten enemy. And that gives us hope. Gives us hope as we think of our own lives and the struggles we have to face. It gives us hope as we think of the sins that we seem to always fall for and the progress we just don't seem to make. It gives us hope as we think of our lack of faith, or our lack of prayer, or our lack of resolve against temptation. This passage shows us the one who broke the chains of Satan, and the rest of the gospel shows us that he has smashed Satan's power on the cross. So this week, we've got two applications coming from this passage. The first one is for anybody who hasn't yet put their trust in Jesus. Maybe you've sort of put your trust in Jesus, but you're not quite ready to fully commit. Well, you need to realize, in that case, the man in this story is you. Okay, you're not stumping around, cutting yourself with rocks. You're not terrifying passers-by. But you need to realize Satan has got you exactly where he wants you. And you need to realize that every ounce of sweat that you put into breaking free from Satan's grip, it's wasted. Because you'll never have the strength. You need Jesus every bit as much as this demon-possessed man. Second application is for those who are following Jesus. Have you ever wondered, if you've read this story before, why does Jesus allow these demons to go into these pigs and then stampede into the water? Can't really see past the masks, but I imagine the farmers are wincing a little bit at that thought. Well, surely there's a simple answer. Jesus wanted to show that these demons were definitely 100% gone. He wanted to show that these demons were not going to come back and they were not going to take over this man again. This man, as we see in verse 15, he's in his right mind, and Jesus wants him to know that's not going to be taken away from him because Satan has been defeated. And if you're a Christian, the application is this. This is who you are. You are dressed, and you're in your right mind. Satan's control has been smashed. Jesus has cast him out, and he is definitely gone. Yes, there are times that he comes skulking back. There are times when he tries to convince you to rip off those clean clothes and open up those old wounds again. But he's beaten. Now, I don't know if this man ever had the temptation after being healed to go back to what he was, to go back to the graveyard. But all he had to do was remember the shrieking of those pigs, and he'd be reminded he was totally 100% free. We have something better to remember, don't we? We have the cross of Jesus Christ. And so this week, as you face temptation, as you encounter those sins that you have appeased and you've allowed them to fester, as they threaten to drag you down, remember, Jesus has shattered the power of Satan. This week, as your mind goes at 100 miles an hour, as it panics over the sins of the past, as you doubt your salvation, remember, Jesus has been to the cross. This week, as you get taken by surprise, as Satan sneaks up on you and you are tempted with an intensity that you just never saw coming, say to yourself, I'm dressed, I'm in my right mind, and Jesus has won. And even if this coming week is not one of major battle and major temptation or major doubt, well, we should all be so thankful for the work of Jesus on the cross, shouldn't we? He has triumphed over the enemy, he has disarmed him, and he has put him